Hey, who's on with us? Everybody light up the chat. Tell us where you're coming in from. We are look, we're excited to be back with you all. It's been a minute. It's been a lot's happened since December. For those of you that were on last time, we were on with Kim Scott and we were going through her new piece of work, Radical Respect. Um, and it's worth watch if you missed it. And for today, we're taking on a little bit more of a heavy, kind of somber
Heavy.
reality, but it's kind of like, we've drawn a line in the sand as a firm, and feel like that this is like the right time to start. And I'll tell you why we've picked this topic today. But before we get started, for those of you who are first timers, put a shout out in the chat if this is your first time joining us for Leadership Matters. Let me tell you a little bit about this format. It's a live show. We're going to be chatting back and forth with you all. We're going to deal with two challenges. The whole hope for Leadership Matters is to take on the toughest leadership problems that you all are struggling with. So once a month, we go out to a community of Leadership Matter insiders, ask for challenges that people are grappling with. We trend those and take on this hour to kind of really dive in together, but not just from Liz and I's perspective, drawn on Liz's research and our firm's research, but also we're going to be crowdsourcing here. We're going to be looking for solutions from you all, and we highlight those back to the community. So this is truly a collective intelligent effort. And today, the reason why we picked this particular topic is because, well, it was just trending really heavy. So as we looked, as our team looked through all the submissions, the number one thing by a long shot was, how do I deal with these diminishing bosses? Hardcore diminishing bosses, and maybe just kind of the range and the spectrum. And so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to do it a little different too. Normally, we start right off the bat with two challenges. We're going to do that, but we're going to do it second. First, we're going to kind of step into, well, the state of the union with diminishing right now. Liz, what do you think?
Well, first of all, welcome to the first timers. I saw, let me see, April, Stephen, Julie, Trevor. I think there are several more. Thanks for joining us. I have to admit, when I saw the topic that we chose, I was really sad. I'm like, I don't know that I want to take on diminishing leadership right now because it just feels like we're in a heavy time. It's a heavy topic. And then I was thrilled that we were doing this. I'm proud that we were doing this in this moment in time. And then as I was preparing, I got a little bit heavy again. And I'm hoping that we end this session with a sense of hope. And I don't mean just kind of like what's heavy in the world right now, but I think this is a hard time to be a manager right now. And I'm hearing this from so many organizations that being a leader feels difficult, hard, thankless, impossible. And add to that, I think this pull that we have towards diminishing, which we're going to talk about. And anyway, so I'm encouraged. And I think some of this hope that I expect to feel as the result is going to be what I learn with on chat. That's what we've got our computers in front of, so we can really see what's happening in chat. So we are going to ask everyone for their best thinking about how do you deal with diminishing bosses and diminishing environments and diminishing cultures where it feels like your honest, earnest attempts to be a multiplier leader, to really bring out light and intelligence inside organizations feels like it's stuck. And I think there are some people who feel like, man, I am trying, but there are forces that are opposing me inside my organization or in the world right now. So I'm excited that we're taking this on.
Well, let's get into it. So, in the book, you make this clear distinction in multipliers. And if anybody hasn't read multipliers, well, we would love to know that, because maybe we can even help you with a copy. You put that in chat just so we can take note. But in multipliers, you make this really clear distinction between an accidental diminisher versus these kind of like hardened diminishers. What's the difference in the approach that we should take? Dealing with, let's say you have a boss that's an accidental diminisher versus somebody that you're like, yeah, they're pretty hardened diminisher.
Well, first of all, I should explain like why I brought this book. It's not like promoting the book, other than just a reminder that there's a second edition of this book. Now, I know some people who have read multipliers early on might not know this. And the reason why I worked on a second edition of this book, it's got this Blueburst revised and updated, was to add a chapter on how to deal with diminishers. I found so many people aspire to be multipliers, but they, like, part of what's limiting them is the fact that they're recipients of diminishing leadership. And so there is a chapter in there as well. And in this chapter, I do kind of make this distinction between like garden variety diminishing, which is the bulk of diminishing that is happening in our organization, and then the really pernicious, persistent, very difficult to deal with diminishing that feels a little bit more nefarious, a little bit more like you can't quite slap the accidental diminisher card on it. It's like, actually, that person might be doing that on purpose.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I probably had moments where I was being a little rough, and it might have been on purpose. Like I really had gotten myself into a state. And I think the way that we deal with them is different. And, maybe we should start our conversation with a quote. It's in the book, and it's one of my just this favorite anchors anytime I'm dealing with how do you deal with diminishing leadership, is to remember that returning diminishing leadership with more diminishing doesn't work.
The fight fire with fire strategy is out.
Yeah, like, oh, okay, let me see. I've heard, like, the religious folks might say you can't do the Lord's work in the devil's way, like somehow kind of like pushing away diminishers does not work. Like the best strategy for dealing with diminishers is to continue on the path of multipliers and to multiply up. And the thought that I wanted to share, it's from Martin Luther King. And we are just recording this a few days after Martin Luther King Day in the United States. And of course, he's talking about the danger of responding to violence with more violence. But I think it's this perfect metaphor for how we break the cycle of most diminishing. He says the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. And those are literally his words. Like I did not substitute words there. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Which I think is how some people feel right now, that like there's some scary things happening around them. And then he says, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And, what I have found, and certainly when I studied this, before doing the second edition of the book, looking at how do we tend to respond to diminishers, what works and what doesn't work. And what doesn't work is diminishing, pushing away. See, like our most common strategies for dealing with diminishers when I did this research was to argue with them, to stop listening to them, to avoid them, to push them away, to report them to HR,
to cut them out of the party,
to
to
cut
create
them
the
out.
back channel.
Yeah, and it's so natural because, like, if you are having a diminishing effect on me, my instincts say, like, push you away, keep you out. But what happens when you argue with a know-it-all?
Yeah, it's
Like,
just fine.
think about your last attempt to do this,
yeah,
Sean.
it's just
How well
another
did that
log
work?
on their fire. They've just got to prove you wrong.
It's another log on the fire, absolutely. What happens when you try to keep away, push away a controlling, micromanaging boss?
Immediate suspicion, reconnaissance, full out attack. I mean,
they're coming in bigger.
They're gonna. It's now all of a sudden you're on their board. You just weren't kind of somebody that they were pushing around. You're a target.
Yeah, and what happens when you like report someone who's already kind of suspicious that like they're not enough, they're not good enough, like, and there might be times when you need to report bad bosses to HR. But when we do this as maybe our first strategy, it tends to cause like more oppression, more intervention.
But what you're saying is it's the natural part of the dance, because if somebody's berating you, belittling you, telling you what to do, always in your stuff, the first thing you're going to want to do out of you're crazy if you don't, is to cut them out, to minimize your influence and your interactions with, not influence, but your interactions with them. So, I mean, this is just the natural thing that we're going to do without any thought.
It is our knee-jerk reaction, and it absolutely exacerbates the diminishing dynamic. I
And the
think,
more control they need, the faster this
right.
triggers this.
So this is one where we have to take this more informed, more evidence-based and counterintuitive approach. Now, Sean, I think you have a slide, and maybe we can pop that up. There's a slide that captures like what fuels the diminishing cycle and what seems to break that cycle.
Okay, let's get, here it is.
Yeah, and we're not going to talk through this, so maybe just click through that. And I think we'll let just people read through that. But if you want to go into like some of the detail on there, you can see how this tends to exacerbate diminishing, and then how you might break that cycle, you know, instead of returning that controlling behavior with more ignoring, pushing away. Like if you respond with curiosity, which is the hallmark of multiplying leaders, like where does that come from? Like, where did they learn to do this? What are they nervous about? What are they worried about? Like, what assurances might they need to be able to like let go, calm down, step back, open up their mind? If you respond with curiosity, you know, consider their perspective. I brought, you know, my perspective taking block that we've used, like, what does this situation look like from their perspective? Why are they so uptight about this? Why are they so worried? Why do they think I'm going to screw this up? Like, who disappointed them last quarter, or who did they get yelled at because the revenue target came in lighter? Like, when you look at what it looks like from their perspective, or what's happening above them or around them, and who just chewed them out, you know, from the client side, then you start to get inside like their head, and you can learn what's going on for them. And you know what it tends to build is trust, respect. Now, returning, multiplying for diminishing, or responding to diminishing with multiplying behavior rather than diminishing, I want to be really clear. It does not poof them into a multiplier. It doesn't necessarily change their behavior. It doesn't necessarily change their leadership style, but what it does is it starts to change the relationship. Like, instead of pushing you away, I'm sorry that I picked you to be the diminisher in this. I probably should have done the opposite. um, is instead of pushing you away, like, you now feel respected as my leader. You feel trusted. You feel like confident, like you have more visibility into what I'm doing. And so it's changing the dynamic between us, which means that you're more likely to return to me trust and curiosity and interest and openness. Like, you know, when we trust other people, they tend to trust us. So it's not necessarily magically changing them into the leader you want, but it's changing the dynamic such that you now have space to maneuver, space to work, space to think. You know, it really is about getting out of the sense that this is about me, and it's really like believing that it's not inevitable, and it's operating with this sense that you could be a better leader than your leader, that you could lead your leader. And honestly, and I kind of want to claim this because it sounds a little Pollyanna-ish. So I kind of want to own it. It really is about looking at things not just from their perspective, but looking at it with what I have to call like a lens of love, which is not easy to do when someone is micromanaging you, someone is antagonizing you. And I brought another pair of my favorite glasses, and these might have been souvenirs from a Taylor Swift concert. But it's kind of putting on, we talk about looking at things through this opportunity lens. I think it's this lens of looking at someone's best intentions, looking at someone's good intent, looking at what they might be doing in some ways as an act of love that doesn't come off that way. And I want to tell you about, I think one of One of the most challenging experiences I had in the work world was I had this colleague who was controlling, micromanaging. She was in people's face
Mhm.
all the time, emails at every hour, nitpicking people's work. And she wasn't their boss, but everyone like she was making everyone
Mm.
crazy. And I had gone out on maternity leave. I had had a baby. It was my last baby, Joshua, my baby. And I had come back from maternity leave, and while I was gone, like this problem had really kind of been whipped into a frenzy. And I finally went to my boss, who was also this person's boss, and said, "We've got a problem here. Like everyone feels attacked, shut down, judged, questioned." And I kind of expected him to solve it.
Mhm.
And I felt like I had done my duty in reporting this. And we decided that this person needed a coach.
Mm.
And so we went out, we talked to a bunch of coaches, you know, described the situation. The coaches were like, "I'm out." And we couldn't really find a coach. And so my boss said to me something that just outraged me. He said, "Liz, do you think you could coach her?" And I'm like, "Oh." And he's like, "Do you think that you could coach her? And do you think you could do it and look at her the way you look at Joshua, my newborn baby, who was perfect and innocent and sweet and like squishy and cuddly?" And I'm like, "Oh." And I'm like, the shock from this is reeling off. And I thought about this and I thought, what he's asking me to do is to love her. And what he's asking me to do is not just love her, he's asking me to really, really, really love her. Like love her the way I love my precious little baby, which is an unconditional love. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm not mature enough to
No,
do that. No.
no.
Like I know, you know, like, no, the coaches wouldn't do that. We would pay them. And I'm like, that's outrageous to ask me to do this. And I thought about it and I thought, I'm gonna do that. And I saw the situation differently and I saw the good intent and I saw the goodness and the potential. And I don't know if I, you know, really made any like material differences, but it really changed me and it
Mm.
changed the way I dealt with the situation. And I kind of think that is how we need to respond to a lot of garden variety
Mhm.
diminishing, not people who are, you know, trying to
Mhm.
cut us off at the knees, but people who are just trying to get results and
Mhm.
trying to do their best. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like, can you look at it
Mhm.
sort of through this lens of
Mhm.
how does this person
Yeah.
show love?
And
Like,
you
could I love them even though
mm,
they're making me crazy?
you just did something that's really important, and we're going to come back to this towards the end of the show, but there's a difference between multiplying up um, versus dealing really with this dark arc of diminishing. We're going to make that later, but you just said that in this scenario, this is your garden variety diminisher. This person's not, you know, a full-on like headline grabbing narcissist that eats children for breakfast. Like they're trying to take you out. And that's an important distinction because this strategy seems like us. How can you really give them the best and to think through like what are they really trying to intend to do? What are they trying to accomplish? And then now all of a sudden you're in this space of consideration and thought and curiosity can start to come your way. There was a project manager before HP bought EDS. There was this amazing, very intense project manager that was always at EDS. She was always running multi, you know, anywhere from $3 to $100 million projects, and there were both government projects with the Department of Defense and other integrators, and that, you know, in that kind of defense complex. And it's a pretty high stakes intense game. Nobody's really nice in that game. And she would say to people, if you were struggling with your boss, she would say, "Oh, you've just got to love your boss like you love your clients." But it was something that everybody kind of understood. It's like because you put up with sometimes some crap from your clients, but you figured out a way to be like, well, what do they need? Not you know. what's necessary for success, but what are they personally wanting to? That's a little bit of an extra consideration. And I feel like that always just kind of helped me go, yeah, to get those glasses on. Like, yeah, you try to love your clients. You try to figure out what are they both needing and wanting.
And it's easier to love our clients in some ways because we have this hierarchy, and the hierarchies in
And
organizations
it's
persist in their
obvious.
mind. Like, I'm supposed to take
Mhm.
care of
Yeah.
my clients. Who's supposed to take care of me? My boss.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
boss is
Yeah.
supposed to take care of me so I can take care of my clients. And it's wonderful when it works that
Yeah.
way. And it's wonderful when families work this way, but we
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
families are
Yeah.
complex too. And sometimes, um, and I say this as a parent now of adult children, is like, I kind of need my children to be like loving me and doing some of the things for me that I have done for them over the years. Like that relationship starts to look more like a peer
Hmm.
relationship. And I've had these experiences where I'm like, oh, gee, I have to be the mature one in this parental
Mm.
relationship with my own like father or elders, and so just getting stuck in this elder mentality of no, the people above me in the org chart are supposed to be good to me
Hmm.
and take care of me. Sometimes we have to be the ones
Yeah.
to love
Hmm.
up, to empathize
Hmm.
upward. And it's also one of the hallmarks of impact players is people who can look upward and go, gee, I bet your job is hard.
Hmm.
I bet there are stressors on you. I bet what you're doing to buffer me
Hmm.
from things that I don't even know are happening, I bet that comes at a cost to you. I bet that makes your fuse a little bit shorter. Like we just don't see
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about that. Let's hit on this. We're gonna come to this concept later on the difference between real nefarious or narcissist bosses and how you approach that. But first, let's talk a little about this reality. Listen, diminishers get results all the time. There are insanely successful diminishers in this world. So, why do you think that that is, and what's the cost?
Well, this is, I think, one of the uncomfortable truths that we have to deal with. And multipliers is full of like uncomfortable truths. Like most of us have a diminisher in us. I clearly do. Like I have a diminisher just waiting to get out. And so I'm constantly keeping that diminishing side of me like at bay. That's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable that my best intentions can go awry. I think one of the uncomfortable truths is diminishing can be a path of success. It would be so naive to say like multipliers win, diminishers lose, because it can be a path of success. If you think at some of the people who are really, really successful, some of them have pursued a very diminishing path to get there. And, I think that the truth that has to be stated is that diminishing can be a recipe for winning in the short term. It's rarely a recipe for winning in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Like it can get results.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've seen other people get results with it. I have seen myself get results in this way. I mean, but it almost always comes at a cost. And like think about the costs of diminishing. Like it tends to create disengagement. It wastes resources. We know that. It tends to have a reverb. Like there's almost always some form, like once people get diminished and they start to feel bad, and you see like businesses suffer often in the medium term and long term, and there tends to be a kickback. At the most dramatic, it's a revolt
Mm-hmm.
as we figure out how to push diminishing leaders, like persistently diminishing leaders out
Mm-hmm.
of organizations. We see revolutions
Mm-hmm.
inside
Mm-hmm.
like governments and political systems, but there is always some sort of reverb to it. I think there's going to be some really good stuff going on in chat, and we need to pause
Yeah,
and
there's a
and
really
make
good
sure we're seeing
question
this.
here. Do you find a pattern in organizations of multiplier leaders leveraging diminishing middle management personalities to get results, even though less results in the long term for short-term wins?
Yes, yes, yes. I remember once a conversation with a founder CEO of a rapidly growing tech company. And he was very intrigued by this concept of multipliers. And I remember he said to me, he said, I feel like I've allowed diminishing leadership to go on in my organization, below him. And he's like, I kind of knew it was happening,
Mm,
but I sort of shut it out, put blinders onto it. And he said, because these people got results and they projected such an air of confidence, like, boss, I
mhm,
got this under control,
mm.
that with everything that was going on, I'm just trying to hold the wheels onto the car as we're driving so fast. He said, I think I wanted and I needed that assurance that things were going to be okay.
Mhm.
And these like diminishing
Yeah, there's a
middle.
real temptation to turn a blind eye to that when you're in a position of leadership and you need stuff done to win, and all the pressures that you're feeling, you're bearing that on your shoulders. Just turn a little bit of blind eye to some mildly bad behavior to get short-term results. Oh,
And that assurance
yeah.
that like we've got things under control when clearly, in those rapid growth environments, you don't have everything under control. And so I think it's easy to let that happen. And so I think we have to decide, and I think also diminishing is a winning strategy if all you care about is your own success. Like honestly, if someone were coming to me and say, Liz, how do I be really successful in the work world? Well, I'm like, well, just you? Nobody else?
Mm,
Well, like, I could definitely take that person down the path of, okay, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna project confidence, but like you could see that being a strategy, but you have to really decide, like, are you in this for more than the short term? Are you trying to build something great? Do you care about like the organization? Do you want to be able to continue to win when things get fraught with ambiguity and
mm,
uncertainty, because diminishing leadership does not work in those
mhm,
environments.
mm,
So there is, I think the reality is there's a lot of temptation to be a diminisher. And our current environment is full of
mm.
bait right
Yeah.
now. Like we are in a business environment, a macro environment. We're seeing the rise of authoritarianism,
Mhm.
not just in the US,
All
around
over.
the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
like, all through Europe, South America, we're seeing it in the US. There's a reason why that happens.
Yeah.
Once some conditions come in where the economy is not great, obviously it has to do with like, heightened levels of immigration, the economy is not great, and people feel like the democratic models that they aspire to aren't serving the people. Like you start to see this, and I think if you ask most people, like, is authoritarian leadership good?
Yeah.
I think they'd say no.
Yeah.
But when people start to feel diminished, it's so tempting to want a fixer, a
Mhm.
strong man,
Yeah.
someone who's going to come in, project competence, and say, I've got this covered. I'm going to do this. I'm going to fix this, and your life will be better. And people then submit.
Mhm.
Um, and we're seeing it all over the world, and we're seeing it on all sides of the
Mhm.
aisle, all
Mhm.
sides of the
Yeah.
political
Yeah. Yeah.
spectrum. This is not limited to a single party. Anytime you get this like militantism around ideas, like
Mhm.
there's one way to think about it,
Mhm.
this is what's
Yeah.
politically correct, you're not allowed to see it differently. That's its own
Yeah,
form
it's
of
it's the weapon of
authoritarianism.
choice on both ends. There's another cost there that I was thinking about. There was we've got a great partner, BTS. They run multipliers business simulations around the world, and there was this real good friend of ours, a colleague who was there for years. His name's Jim, and he said to me once he noticed a certain kind of attrition when you have middle management that's diminishing, and then kind of like a blind side or a blind eye at the top. And he said what happens is you have a certain kind of attrition. It's not like multipliers who actually have a lot of attrition as well because people grow and they get promoted. So they're kind of like these ladder providers, if you will. It's different. It's this people leave, and in the talent market, they're pissed off and they take talent with them. And so it's like it's kind of like the most talented people go first and this
Mhm.
kind of attrition. So the cost is massive because you're not just replacing people. You have to replace the people that where it's easiest for them to go and they're the first ones out the door. And so the cost can be a whole lot more than just a dissatisfied, disengaged group. A lot of times you're leaking, you're bleeding talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to recognize that we are in an environment where there are heightened levels of fear, uncertainty, ambiguity, and it's easy for people to just say, I don't know how to navigate this. like, boss, just
Yeah.
tell me what
Yeah.
to do. So if we want to avoid that, we have to get really good at helping people navigate
Yeah.
uncertainty. Now,
I've got a question for you on this. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
well, we're going to get into these two challenges, but I think we wanted to recognize kind of what is the state of affairs and why are we seeing, I see you got your Harry Potter gear on, by the way, like, obviously not lost on me, not lost on all of us. I heard that opening music, but I would also say, if, like, I might pick something music here. It might be sort of like, um, the Empire Strikes Back kind of thing, because I think we are seeing like the return of the diminisher.
Yeah.
We're seeing like the diminisher strikes back in many ways. And we are in an environment where that is conducive. Now, Lauren could not be here today. She is attending to a sick child. So Austin Plyler, who is our producer, who is like kind of like the brains behind the Leadership Matters podcast, has agreed to fill in and be nerd for the day. He's his own form of nerd. So Austin, can you give us a few stats just about like what's going on in the macro environment that's giving way for the rise of diminishing leadership?
Yeah, for sure. And I want to give all credit to Lauren. She did all the research and put these stats together. So you have the same great stats, just without the gravitas, the charm, the entertainment factor, with some added nausea and perhaps dizziness. So credit to her for that. But yeah, I mean, while quickly reviewing these stats, the first one is in 2024, the 10th annual Chapman Survey of American Fears found that the number one fear for Americans was corrupt government officials. So very timely. 65% of those respondents said they were afraid or very afraid of corrupt government officials. The number 2 and 4 fears were people I love becoming seriously ill and people I love dying. So echoes of what's been happening the last few years. So that's kind of what's surrounding the workplace. Now, when we dive into the workplace, the one study showed that 86% of workers report having experienced moderate, high, or extreme stress within this past year. And 83% of those experiencing extreme stress listed work as their primary stressor. So vast majority of people are stressed, they say, and a vast majority of those people cite work as the reason. Part of that is the worsening mental health among workers. 7 in 10 say their mental health stayed the same or got worse last year in 2024. And 61% say they felt down, depressed, or hopeless in the last month. And 68% report trouble falling asleep. So I know there's a lot there, 7 to 10, 61%. So, but basically, again, a vast majority is like, we're not doing too hot. It's a little stressful in the workplace. Other stats that Lauren has listed here: half of U.S. workers say they've experienced significant burnout in the last year, with mental and emotional stress and long hours listed as the top factors. And this last one's very interesting. It's 40% surveyed said that people shortages are the most stressful part of their job. So I don't know if people in the chat have experienced that, but it's really stressful when we have this churn and people leaving the team. Then just all that work falls on. So.
Austin, thank you for that. Thank you for nerding out on Lauren's in her absence today. I think like what I take from that is we are in an environment where there's so much uncertainty that it's easy for leaders to want to step in and just fix things for people. And we're in an environment where it's easy for people to just go, okay, fix it for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the confession that I would make. It's that when I feel stressed out or pressure or something really matters to me, I want to take control. I want to step in and tell people what to do. It's so easy for me to kind of be pulled into that or tempted into that. And I saw that the question you put in the chat is like, well, what baits us into diminishing?
Yeah, and let's look at some of this. We're seeing exhaustion, the need for safety and predictability, wanting to fix things and make it easier. Like it feels good to fix things for people, and what baits us in. Now, as we're going through this, like I would look at each one of those and go, like, if this is happening, if it's coming from your leadership, what might be their good intent behind it? How might they be trying to fix things, like make things stable, make things easy? It's one of the ways that we can deal with diminishing, like a fear of failure, like I've been burned by previous mistakes. Like, I often, that's a question I ask myself when someone is so uptight, diminishing. I'm like, who failed you before?
Mm-hmm.
And where is like what's the scar tissue
Mm-hmm.
for you on that? Non-performance of a teammate. And as people are renegotiating their relationships with work, and a lot of people are kind of like stepping back, holding back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for leaders to step in and want to like demand more.
Yeah. Julia mentioned this idea of fear of mistakes are causing conflict or stress with fellow staff. And we were just reading through a bunch of problem submission yesterday. And, another thing that came up over and over again is people just really worried about having too much conflict with their team right now, worried that they were going to contribute to conflict with their team. And so, this is like, this is on people's mind. There's some tension. And when you're tense, working with any team, when you're not, when you don't feel like you can kind of just let the weight of the game off in the locker room, it causes a lot of kind of like infighting and challenging and suspicion. And if you're a leader, that can lead to kind of like overplaying your hand and trying to be over directive. And so there's this pressure kind of coming from without, and that kind of gets inside. And so it's easy to kind of be like, we've got to get our job done. We can't have all these little squabbles. I'm just going to kind of tell people what to do and take the reins, because you do get this sense that, people are feeling this tension, this burnout, everything that Austin just shared.
Hmm. Hmm. And I guess maybe I want to say the obvious, it comes at such a cost.
Yeah.
There was a comment that was just submitted as hosts where, someone here in our session live is saying like, I'm experiencing this diminishing right now, and it is causing me tremendous levels of grief. And so very much, for the person who sent that in, like I see that and I heard that. And it's one of the things I heard in the research. It doesn't just affect our work, our intelligence, our ability to solve problems. It affects our identity, our our sense of joy. It creates tremendous grief, like existential grief for people. It's one of the reasons why I keep doing this work and why I feel so strongly about this. We want to get into these scenarios. I'm also seeing a couple questions come up. There's one here: is diminishing, can it be taken as bullying, discrimination, favoritism, and so on? What's your take on this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that well, I mean, let's take that with a question. I mean, who feels like we're seeing a rise of kind of diminishing globally, and what's pulling us to this towards this pattern, even if we know better? Well, I'd say that we would all agree that we are seeing the examples on both sides of political aisles, a lot of bullying,
Yeah.
and that's the way that we're getting things done. Is we're
Yeah,
gonna
no one party can claim the other one's
no
doing it.
no.
Well, they are, but it's just not true.
It's not true.
It's happening.
Both sides have gloves on. And so I think that when you're in this environment where people feel like that the way to get things done is to kind of use aggression and force, the natural thing that comes out of this is bullying. And if you're seeing this kind of on a macro scale exemplified, it can even be kind of to where you start thinking that maybe that's the way you lead. And you kind of follow that trend. And I think that we are seeing a lot of that. And we're seeing, well, think of a good example of somebody who's at globally that we're thinking about that's getting press leading as a multiplier. Long-term strategy, sees the intelligence of others. You think of somebody like a Nelson Mandela. I mean, these characters aren't just popping up everywhere that are getting press. And so I think that you've kind of got this bullying trend going on both ends, and that can make it easy for leaders to kind of opt into the same idea.
And it's in some ways when we look at our political context, and I know we have people joining us from all around the world, but this dynamic is playing out in a lot of political systems. You start to feel like a good person can't win in these systems,
Right.
and good leaders can't win. And we're seeing like good leaders who are taking nonpartisan stances, trying to drive change, being pushed down. And I think the reason why I wanted to emphasize this is because this mentality starts to bleed into our business spheres as well. And we think that this is a path of success. That is, I think, the context that we're operating in right now. It's harder than ever to be a manager.
Yeah.
it's harder than ever to be a really good manager, but the benefits of doing it are there.
Yeah.
We've got a couple questions. Why don't we take these two scenarios? Let's look at them. And I'm gonna try to make sure we address Anwar's comment and Mike's comment or questions as we do
Okay, yeah,
this.
good.
As all sessions, everyone like continue to answer each other's questions and add insight into chat. Sean and I don't always see it because it's hard to listen,
Mhm,
talk,
mhm.
and read and respond all in the same moment. Austin, if there's a comment you want to highlight, feel free to
Yep.
like buzz in and let us know. Let's go through challenge one, then challenge two.
So in this context, here are the two challenges that we selected of the many of people struggling with the diminisher. So let's read through this one and then talk about, so for this next 20 minutes, let's really get into prescriptions. What can you do in these scenarios? And so please throw into chat while we're also sharing some ideas that we've learned from leaders and observed in our practice on how to deal with a situation like this. Okay, so here we go. First one. I was recently promoted to an executive VP level working for a newly promoted SVP. My new SVP operates at a level of detail and micromanagement that is painful. Her level of involvement is more than my level of detail when I was a director. Unfortunately, my new SVP is much more of the school of do it my way, deflects feedback, and frankly is urgency addicted, which is a brilliant way to say that. How do I give this leader what they want while still creating a positive environment? But before we answer this, I have a surprise. I think that there's
Okay.
we kind of really need to feel this challenge
Oh
for a
my
second.
goodness,
And
look
so,
what you have.
okay. So for those of you that are Harry Potter fans, you know about Birdie Bots. And I should get this on
Yeah,
because
you need your cloak on.
okay, so Birdie Bots are every flavored jelly beans. And they're these wonderful jelly beans that are kind of like
You're suiting up.
I'm suiting up for this. Okay, so here's what they are. I'm going to read this really funny thing that my wife sent me on this so everybody knows what these are just in case you haven't. So Birdie Bots, here we are. Every flavored jelly beans are a type of jelly bean with a twist. They come in every flavor imaginable, from downright delicious to downright disgusting. Unlike regular jelly beans, where you can expect only sweet, fruity flavors, these beans could taste like chocolate or cherry, or just as easily soap, dirt, or even earwax. So the fun or the risk comes with not knowing what you're going to get until you bite into one. So I feel like this would be a hard situation to be in. I think that to empathize with our challenge, we should eat a
my
Birdie Bot.
gosh.
We should take this risk and explain.
I honestly thought this is a surprise for me. I thought this was like a metaphor for managers. It's kind of like you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Like, you think you're getting cherry, but you get earwax.
That
And
is
that's
what
like
this
what
metaphor is about.
and it's kind of like with this challenge. I was promoted, but now I'm working with this like micromanaging, firefighting crazy boss. So do I just take one
You
of
got to pick
these?
one, and then you have to name what it is. So I'll let you go first. You don't have like a weird.
I'm not gonna eat that. That's so gross.
You had a weird gag reflex, and you beat me to it. I couldn't even ask you for it.
That's terrible.
Flavor.
It was like dirt earwax or something. I don't know. Like
Okay,
this game.
This is what it's like sometimes to deal with these challenges. Okay, here I go, and no, you only need to do
Oh,
one per
one.
challenge. Just one per
Ugh.
challenge. Here I go. Okay. Oh, this is bad.
Are these all bad? Did you just fill this with bad ones? I think you
I'm pretty sure this
you
is
rigged the
vomit.
game.
I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna choose to work for this boss.
Goodness.
Okay, I've done it. Okay,
Okay.
here we go. Let's go through what can you do in this scenario, even though it's so bitter. This is such a hard situation to be in. My mouth is telling me that's the case.
Okay, it is bitter. I want to do some rapid fire on strategies for dealing with diminishers. This chapter in this book has 13 strategies. Some are like survival strategies, others are kind of multiplying up strategies. I want to start with like the base strategy. When you've got a micromanager, you've got someone who's kind of like worried, concerned, unnecessarily, like first defensive strategy against like the dark arts of diminishing leadership is to send the right signals. Like to let them know you got this.
Mhm.
Like, okay, someone's like, okay, we have to do a great job on this. You have to send the signal, like, this is an important thing we're working on. I'm going to make sure I give it my best
Mhm.
effort.
Mhm.
Like, this is urgent. I've just moved this aside. I've assigned this to somebody else. I'm all over this. You have to send messages like, I hear you.
Mhm.
I'm not discounting what you're
Mhm.
saying. It's important, and you are a master at this.
Mm.
And I think it comes from like your early work experience working with clients out in the software world where like things go wrong, and like just like I hear what you need and I'm going to get you what you need.
Mhm.
Now, if that's all you do, you end up sort of a lapdog,
Yeah.
and you're like you are just like you're running around sort of like working to their every whim, but you start there to just
Yeah.
calm them down.
Mhm.
The strategy is send the right signals. The second thing is one of my favorite strategies with dealing with diminishers is to assert your capability. So, this person is like, um, you know, do it my way, micromanaging. Like, part of what you need to do there is to signal, I've got this.
Mhm.
So it's not only like I hear you
Mhm.
and I'm
It's
on
not
it.
confirmation that I have your request. This is a little different.
It's I understand your request. I'm on it, and I don't need your intervention.
Mhm.
Like I look at this as channeling your inner
Yeah.
3-year-old. Like what
Yeah.
happens when you try to do for the 3-year-old
Yeah.
what 3-year-old could do for themselves.
Yeah.
They're like, no, daddy, I do it.
Yep.
And they don't tell you that you're a terrible boss. They don't report you to the grandparents, daddy's oppressive.
Yeah.
They just assert their capability, like, I got this and I don't need help. And so you're starting to now, first is you're built their confidence in you. Now you're getting a little bit more elbow
Mm.
room to move. From there, I would try to get like more space to think, like when they're sort of like, here's how I want you to do it my way. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Let me consider that.
Mhm.
And let me come back to you with a plan. So rather than respond right there,
Yeah.
and this is a strategy I learned talking to someone who had worked for Steve Jobs, and she found that when she went to go and present to Steve, and he was not interested in her ideas, or he had such a clear way he wanted it done, and he was like, but this and this and this, and you haven't factored that in. Instead of trying to argue with him
Mhm.
on the spot, she would say, you know what, you've given me really an important insight that I want to consider. Would it be okay if I think a little bit more about what you've asked or what you're suggesting and come back to
Yeah.
you with a plan?
Yeah. Yeah.
She said every single time,
Mhm.
giving herself space, calming him down. I mean, not like childishly calming him down, but just hearing him and then coming back. She came back having factored in his ideas,
Mhm.
defending her own
Mhm.
that she knew were solid, and he always approved of.
Yeah, there's piece of research that I'm working on right now. There's this one behavior that I was trying to figure out when you're in a scenario where you're trying to prioritize and figure out what matters most. And then after you do all that hard work, you later comes to you and asks you to do a bunch of things that are 100% off the target that everybody's agreed to. This can be maddening. Everybody's has experienced this. They know how emotionally disrupting this is. And there was a set of leaders that consistently showed up in this way where they would do this thing where they would send the right signals. I've got this. I understand you. And the way they would assert their capability was, instead of saying, no, I'm not doing that, to try to kind of, show how strong they were to their boss. They'd hear it all out. They'd listen to it. They'd go back with their team, understand what the cost of those decisions were, and then go back and say, hey, I really appreciate this request that you've made. I would just like to share some things that we've thought about since then. I would like to get your point of view on this. The, the amount of influence that they gained with their boss and their ability to renegotiate that agreement was so much higher because they sent the right signals and then asserted their capability in a way that this leader didn't make them feel small or didn't, get the gloves on and start a fight. It gave them a chance to be able to consider things that they weren't ready to consider in the moment of asking.
Okay, there's something so important in what Sean just said here is you're gaining influence. And again, these strategies for dealing with the diminisher, they're not about trying to change that person. It's about gaining influence, gaining space, room to do your work, room to think. And the way that we gain influence is by understanding what's important to someone.
Right.
And that is kind of like when you look at it through this lens of love, how are they trying to love their team? How are they trying to love their job? How, like, when we look at it, what's important to them, what do they love? That's when we understand, here's how I can help them get what they need while also getting what I need. But it really does start with this lens. Okay, so we talked about send the right signals, assert your capability, retreat, regroup. I would add to this, ask for performance intel. And what this is not asking them to do an assessment on you. It's just like, okay, of this like piece of work I just did, like what of that, like what have I got right? What still needs to be done? Like giving them a chance to guide you. Like, okay, you're getting warmer here, colder there, is going to give you intel about how to hit the target in their mind. So again, what are you building? Influence. Like I'm hitting the target, and the more that you're hitting their target, the more they are going to back away and go, this person is getting done what I need them to do. I'm going to give them space. Now, I want to add a few kind of multiplier strategies into this, which is to understand their strength, what they're good at, and to start to use that. We love working with people who understand what we are naturally brilliant at. And bosses are people too. I guess maybe that's one of the themes for everything we're talking about. Is like bosses are people too, and they need to be cared about and loved and all of this. And it's like understanding what do they bring to the party. We probably don't have time for it, but I learned this from Ron Johnson and how he at Apple, this retail genius, how he interacted with Steve and how he understood how to utilize Steve's brilliance and intelligence. Understand what your boss is good at and use that. Then maybe the final strategy I would probably use here in this situation is give your boss a user's guide to you. We often think, well, my boss doesn't really see my strengths. They're not utilizing me for my best capabilities. Well, sometimes we need to help people do that rather than wait to be discovered.
Yeah.
Wait for some, what with micromanaging, controlling, urgency, inspired person to figure that out. They're not going to see it. We have to kind of take out a billboard and let people know this is what I'm good at. Here's how I can contribute. This might be a place to use one of my favorite strategies. It's something I do when I find myself kind of a victim of diminishing leadership from organizations I work with that like are, trying to like tell me exactly what they want me to do and not do. I usually come back, which is like, tell me what's important to you. What are you trying to accomplish? And then like, let me figure out how to do that. And what I say is, I want to do an amazing job for you here. Here's what I need from you for me to be able to do my best work. Like, here's what I'm good at. Here's what I can do. Here's what I need from you. And suddenly I find that they feed me the information I need, the intel I need for me to be able to do a good job. In some ways, it's like signaling your intent to do a good job and then like taking charge of the conditions that you need to do your best work.
Well, let's look at this last challenge. And I'm going to take it on with a bit of pain.
Oh, because I'm your friend and I trust you, I'm gonna do this again.
Okay, here we go. I've got to watch this skit, see if you can get this down. What is it?
Dirty ginger or something. I don't know. I don't like
Okay,
ginger.
here I go. I think this could be vomit.
Oh, it's terrible.
Oh.
Do I have to really? Okay.
Okay, here I go. I'm an athletic director at a university. I have a coach who is very much a multiplier when coaching student athletes. Kids love to play for him. He optimizes their talent, instills accountability. However, and I'm feeling this pain as I'm reading this, as part of our development team, he is exactly as you described as a diminisher. Blames others, exerts control. As his leader, I'm having trouble getting him to recognize this inconsistent behavior. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Yeah, it's a good one. And it's kind of like, this is where we want to shake people and just say like, wake up, you don't get it. And I think, I thought about this one a little bit, and I think this needs to start again with assuming best intent. You look like you're going to throw up.
It's so it's hard working for a leader like this.
Well, it is. And I think the approach to multiplying up here would be to start with recognizing what he's doing well. One of the things I hear so much when I ask people like, what did your diminishing leader do? And we try to like call out that behavior. People say they focused on the negative.
Yeah.
It is so easy in wanting to help someone be a multiplier to like, this is what you're doing wrong. You are diminishing. But again, you can't. Darkness doesn't drive out darkness.
Yeah.
Only light does that. What is light in this situation? It's focusing on the positive effect that this coach is having on the kids. And like recognizing that and reinforcing it and starting with what he's doing right. I would then like ask myself why, like this isn't a skill issue. It's an application of a skill. Like, why does he feel like he has to be hardened or what is he blaming, controlling with the parents sort of off to the side of him? Like, where did that come from? And so I would probably spend some time trying to figure that out. I would probably ask him about his experience with other parent groups and by doing that, it might give an opportunity to highlight the gap. Like, I notice that you are this way. And I would avoid the labels like a multiplier or a good leader. It's like, I've noticed that you're this way with the kids. I see the effect it has on that. Like, I wonder what would happen if you were that way also with the parent group. And it might give you an opportunity to understand why not.
Yeah.
And just like something to be curious
Mhm.
about. And like, this is a group that needs your leadership
Yeah.
as well. And, I think I would probably focus on the missed opportunity rather than what he's doing wrong. It's like there is a pocket of underutilized talent, intelligence, energy, support, funding dollars,
Yeah.
like all the things that we want from this group. And it's like you have a chance to lead this group. It might be that he's got a mental model that says, well, I'm a victim of controlling parents. I've seen this. And like this coach has gotten himself in this mentality. It's like, well, this might be a chance for you to actually lead this group
Yeah.
rather than be
Yeah.
a victim of this group. And I would celebrate any behavior in the right direction. It was
Yeah.
something I
Yeah,
learned
yeah.
from Captain Sean Heritage, that when his leader did good things, he didn't wait for that person to suddenly become a good leader. He just said, I celebrated everything that was in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, that's about all we have time for. Before we came on, there was a friend of ours in the firm that actually asked one final question that I'd love for you to weigh on that you're not prepared for, but I'll tee it up real fast. And this was the question. He said to me, how do I know when it's time for me to leave and to look for a different job? If I'm working for somebody that aside from all the strategies, I just don't think that things are going to change here. And actually, we talked about this one concept, which is this, and that's, well, one thing is really important. It is to kind of face the question inside of yourself. Why am I working for this person? And it's a choice. And I think that there's something really, for me anyways, recognizing that there was a time in my career I worked for a diminisher, and it was psychologically very complicated for me. And the times when I think that I dealt with it best before I realized that it was time to leave was I recognized that I was choosing it. And somehow knowing that I chose it actually helped me get to these things like being curious about what he was needing from me or what he was trying to accomplish or what insecurities lived in him that led to these behaviors or the pressure or the bait around him. So somehow, I mean, maybe one of the first things we can do is just ask ourselves the question, why do I choose to work for this person, and recognize that we have choice? And then in that use of agency, we might find new choices and opportunities where we can actually start to try to influence them with some of the strategies that we've talked about. What do you think, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, we often see ourselves as a victim of this, but we are choosing to stay. We are choosing to engage. I look at this as like when there's no hope, when that person cannot change. Um, you know, I think it's similar to like when is it time to separate from an employee? Like when is it
Yeah,
time to
yeah.
fire someone? And it's not when like they can't change as much as when you as their leader can't see them differently. Like
Yeah.
you've got in your head they're a problem employee, a low performer, can't do it. Like, if you cannot change your mental model,
Mhm.
you need to do that person a favor and move them on. And I think it could be similar, which is when we look at our bosses and we put them in a box of diminishing, controlling,
Mhm.
narcissist is a whole other subject
Yeah.
that maybe we should take on. But when you can't see them differently, or you can't imagine that they could ever be different, either because their inability to change or your inability to see them differently, it's time
Yeah.
to move on. And I will tell you, I have heard from so many people who have worked for hardened diminishers that even when those people change, and I've seen those leaders change, the people who work for them won't let them be
Mm.
different. They
Yeah.
won't let them be
Yeah.
better because they're like,
Yeah.
we are going to put you in that permanent,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
penalty box
Yeah.
permanently. So if you can't change your perception about that person, it's time
Yeah.
to go.
It's really good. Well, friends, we are so grateful to spend this time with you. We look forward to reading through the chats and to share that your wisdom with others that weren't able to attend today. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week and a great weekend. And we look forward to seeing you again on the next Leadership Matters.